over. And now we'll just have a brief pause while we connect to all of our mystery lovers over on Facebook. And it looks like we are live. Welcome, mighty mystery friends, family, and community. I'm your on-air host, Sarah DeVello, and I am extremely excited to host the legendary Dean Koontz today. He is joining us here on a mighty blaze to chat with us about his brand new book, Elsewhere, and we could not be more honored to have him. Dean, welcome to A Mighty Blaze. Tell us about Elsewhere.
Wow, I wish you were a little more exuberant, but Elsewhere. Well, it's the story of father and daughter. They're living a very quiet life in a California beach town. Mother left years before, and they don't know what happened to her. The little girl, 11, wishes she had a mother that she hasn't had for 7 years. And up canyon, outside of town, lives this homeless man and some others, but a particular one named Spooky Ed. And Spooky Ed wears a bow tie and a jacket and a shirt, and he goes into town every day for his shower, and he stops on their porch and talks to them, and they think he's pretty normal, actually, until one night he shows up, gives them a little gift box, which is all soiled and strange, tied with old string, and says, I'm giving you this, never open the box, never touch what's in it. For God's sake, never use it. There's very bad people after it. They're after me, and I've got to disappear. And this thing costs $76 billion to make, and so you need to protect it. And if I'm not back in a year, put it in a barrel, fill the barrel with cement, take the barrel out to sea, and drop it in 1,000 feet of water. And he goes away, and they think, wow, we used to think Ed was a normal kind of homeless guy, but obviously Ed is nuts. Except the next morning, a lot of very dangerous people show up looking for Ed and looking for the device in the box. And all of that's in the first couple of chapters. And after that, what happens is you're going to have to buy the book to find out. Well, otherwise, I would have to find other work.
Oh my gosh, Dean, I am already on the edge of my seat and slightly sweating. What a fantastic premise for a book. I know I would not have the self-restraint to be able to resist looking at that device, taking it out, fiddling with it, figuring it out, and using it as Jeffrey and his daughter Amity do. Clearly, they're in my camp of no self-restraint, which is fantastic. What gave you the idea for this crazy book, this crazy idea? Tell us the backstory.
Well, maybe I'm crazy myself. I've been called that. But aside from that, I read a lot of science, and I'm aware of, I have a couple thousand science books in my library, and I read quantum mechanics and everything related to it, molecular biology, not to find ideas. I just love these fields. And I've always known for 50 years about this concept of parallel universes and multiverse, that there are many iterations of us in worlds pretty close to ours, but as you move away from ours, get more and more different. I thought, I'll never write that because I'm not a guy writing a far out there science fiction novel. I bring in some little outside elements into the novels. I write cross genre, but I never wanted to write something that flamboyant. One day I wasn't even looking for anything for an idea. And I thought, I've never written a story about a father-daughter relationship. And wouldn't that be interesting? And I thought, well, that's not a novel. But what if the mother has disappeared 7 years ago, walked out on them because she wanted a career as a musician, but they've never heard from her again, assume she must be dead. And I think that's a good assumption. I thought, well, that's still not a story. But then all that reading and science came back to me. And I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if there really are all these other versions of this little California beach town? And in one of them somewhere, the mother lives, never having married him, never having fathered the girl, alone in her life. Excuse me, I'm so verklempt by my idea. And and they think, wow, this device we've been left with, which we discover will let us go to other versions of Swabi Dog Beach. What if we find one where mom exists and she needs us? And I thought, well, that's a very interesting story. And I like it because it's human values, it's down to earth, and that's what I'm always looking for. What about the human condition will be fun to write about? But then I don't want to let it get so far out of hand it becomes a wild science fiction novel. Though I like wild science fiction novels, I wanted it to be sort of contained. And they encounter some pretty strange versions of Swabi Dog Beach, but it becomes more than the search for the mother. It becomes an attempt to survive what they've unleashed. And that's where the story came from. It started with character. It didn't even start with a premise or a concept.
Wow, I absolutely love everything about this because I love character, but I'm also so intrigued. I remember I've spoken to, I'm in Boston, so there's a lot of universities and colleges here, obviously, and remember, and I am not a science person, I am not a math person, but I know people who work in that world, and I remember several years ago overhearing sort of in the peripheries of a conversation about this idea of these parallel universes, and it stuck with me, this idea that there could be somewhere out there, worlds that are the same as mine, but things have happened differently. And it has stayed with me and haunted me, this potential, this idea for years. So I love that you got into that in this book. I mean, what a fascinating premise. And I had no idea that you were so interested in science, in quantum mechanics. This is very, very cool. We already have questions pouring in from the audience. I want to get to those. Everyone tell us where you're listening from as well. I love the one good thing about this pandemic is that people are able to listen to everywhere. The geographic barrier has been removed. So tell us where you're listening from. Tell us what questions you have for Dean. This is your chance to have access to this literary legend, Dean Koontz. So any questions that you have for him about his writing, about his books, about his ideas, his fabulous dog, tell us. Sharon telling us, hi from Minnesota. I'm so excited for this interview, Dean Koontz. Teresa saying, is there a dog in the story?
No, well, there is. Very late in the story, there is a dog. I can almost not resist, but there is a white mouse that's incredibly important to the story. Because think about it, if some strange guy gave you a box and said, there's a device in this that would change the world. There's evil people looking for it. It costs $76 billion to make. I'm on the run. They're trying to kill me. Don't touch it. And I don't think you would touch it easily. But of course, they have to open the box and they look at it. They put it down. It looks like a cell phone with no controls or anything except a home button. And but they're not going to touch it, except a little girl has a pet mouse, a white mouse she calls Snowball. And she has a nice relationship with Snowball, as we all do with animals if we love animals. And Snowball is intrigued by this strange device, just happens to run down her arm and jump on it. And it's the white mouse that creates the first little trip they take. And after that, they're in too deep to go back. So dog later. First, a white mouse. And book, as everybody in my professional life loves this book so much, I thought, wow, I might have to have a white mouse in every novel henceforth. I don't know how I'll work that in.
Yeah, I think you might have to have a white mouse named Snowball. Dean, let me ask you, if someone showed up at your door, dropped a box, said there was a $76 billion device inside, you could not open it, would you have the self-restraint to open it?
It happens all the time, but it's never a $76 billion device. It's, it's just, I attract certain sort of people to leave boxes off, but no, it's never happened to me. And if it did, how could you resist? You'd have to, even if the black guy was crazy, you'd have to sort of try this and see what would happen. But in a novel, you can't let the characters be that bold. It has to start happening without their permission, and then boom. After that, then they have to use it to save themselves and get back where they want to be, which they do in a kind of timely fashion, except nothing's over them. It's like once you open Pandora's box, look out.
Right, exactly. Once you open Pandora's box, look out. I definitely would be opening the device, but once I realized what it could do, transferring you between these planes, I would be afraid to not get back. What if I got stuck over there? Oh my gosh. Well, this book out today is already a #1 bestseller on Amazon. Book List awarding it a starred review, raving a spectacular, action-packed, character-driven adventure. Koontz remains white hot with another certain bestseller. I could not agree more. Kirkus raving colorful, imaginative, a lively, offbeat novel. And you know that don't come cheap, because at Kirkus is Kirkus is the one to impress. The New York Times, I believe, called them reliably cranky and certainly curmudgeonly. AARP saying a terrifying new tale, fast-paced, hold your breath thriller with a heart. Dean Koontz, amazing, amazing praise. I could go on and on. Your praise is absolutely incredible. People Magazine has said Dean Koontz deftly mixed his humor with horror as he tackles the big questions. Can humans prove that God exists? Why is Elvis scared to go to heaven? The Times of London saying Dean Koontz is not just a master of our darkest dreams, but also a literary juggler. The Washington Post Book World, which, by the way, featured our event today, thank you to them, said Dean Koontz writes page turners, middle of the night, sneak up behind you suspense thrillers. Wow. He touches our hearts and tingles our spines. I absolutely love that, because you really do touch our hearts and tingle our spines. So Dean Koontz, let me ask you, how do you write books that touch our hearts, that tingle our spines? How do you write books that speaks to people in this heartfelt way?
Well, that sounds a little bit like I'm giving people a medical condition, but I hope I'm not. It goes back to what I said before. Stories, we all can put together stories with twists and turns and moments when you think, oh, I gotta put this down and walk around the room because I'm too tense. But what makes that tension better, in my estimation, is if the characters that you're reading about do touch your heart, you do relate to them, you do care about them. I know as a reader, that's always what mattered to me. It could be a very clever story, very exciting, lots of twists and turns, and I might enjoy it, but it wasn't the kind of story that lingered with me. And the kind of stories that lingered with me were stories where I remembered the characters so vividly, or the characters, and cared about them so much that then all those twists and turns really did have my hair standing on end. And I can remember the biggest example of that with me, well, that's happened many times because I fall in love with the characters. But I remember writing Intensity, and China Shepherd, the lead character in that, whom I put through hell in that book, but who had the courage to meet it. And there were many moments where I was so emotionally tied to that character that when something would occur and I go, no, that can't happen. And I realized, yes, it's going to happen and I'm going to have to write it. I'd have to get up and walk around, sometimes for 10 minutes, just to get my stress level down, because I had so identified with the character I'm writing. So if that happens for me, I know that happens for the reader, or I hope it will.
Oh, Dean, I love that. I love that. What do you think, though, is the real secret to writing a character on a page? How do you write a three-dimensional character on, that we're reading this page, but we care so deeply about this person? How do you do that?
It's not just about the plot. It's about the character's worldview. It's about their point of view. I have recently talked about this a lot because I've found out a lot of people don't understand it, or especially people aren't writers. But there's two ways to write a book. Well, there's 1,000 ways to write a book, but in the way I'm talking about, there's two kind of ways. You can write it from the author's point of view, the whole book. The characters are really all sort of sound alike. Or what I do is every character I try to make have a distinct voice. In this book, 11-year-old Amity sounds totally different than her dad. and scenes from her point of view. And every scene in my novels is from one point of view. Don't go into other characters' heads, anything. Everything's from one character's point of view within the scene. Amity has a very distinct voice, much different from her father's. Her father is kind of a dreamer and a likable dreamer. And the bad guy after them, Falkirk, is a sociopath with a very different view of the world. If everybody you meet in the course of the story sounds different to you, and yet there's always an authorial control over that, then I think they become more human to the reader. I remember reading John D. MacDonald many years ago, who, more than any other living writer, taught me more about writing just by reading it. And his characters were so distinct. And that was what made his suspense novels so fabulous, because the characters were so rich. If you can get that character's background into it without pages of background, if you can just give us a character that we fall in love with to some extent. And how is that done on the page? Well, a lot of different techniques. For instance, somebody's mentioned to me recently in an interview, why did I have the fact that Jeffy, the father in this, his wife left him 7 years ago, but Jeffy has just before the story opened sued to have their marriage annulled, is not sued to have her declared dead. And they said, that's sort of odd. She's been gone 7 years. Nobody knows what happened to her. And I said, yes, but you see, if Jeffy had wanted to have her declared dead, that's an ominous thing. If he wants their marriage dissolved because she left him 7 years ago and he's raised the daughter alone, that's a different thing. And we like Jeffy more because he can't bring it in himself to say she's dead, even though he knows she must be. And it's details like that that make us love a character or not. And it's why you need to think character through, I think, more than you need to think plot through.
Oh, wow. Okay. I love that. And thank you for explaining that difference in a way that is, I'm able to understand and really get and really feel. That makes so much sense. I get that. So thank you. Now, when you say that when you're writing your characters, you fall in love with them, you start to care about them, even to the point where you have to get up from your desk, you have to walk around a little bit because you can't believe you're going to do this to them. Does that mean you don't plot out your books? Walk us through what that looks like. Do you channel it? Are you a pantser? Do you see where it goes, or are you a plotter? What is your process like?
Well, many, many years ago, before I ever hit a bestseller list, I plotted them out. I did outlines. And then I was struggling. I was making a living, but not a great one, for quite a number of years. I think I was writing full-time for 12, 14 years before I had a book on a paperback bestseller list. And one day I just said, I'm not going to do this anymore. And one of the reasons was that I would sell the outline. In those days, I would be able to sell the outline because I published a number of books, get a little money up front, write the book, and then deliver it. Publishers would say, oh, well, we love the outline, but this isn't quite like it, or it's very different from it because the book got organic and it changed. Well, my attitude was, it's better than the outline. Their attitude was, we've been thinking about this for a year and we wish it was like the outline. So I finally said, okay, I'm just not going to use an outline. And the first book I didn't was Strangers, and it's a 250,000-word book with a big cast of characters. And I had to keep all of that in my head. And I found out that I enjoyed it. I had a premise. I knew where the end point was, but I didn't know anything in the middle 98%. But I found out that as I let the characters go, they started taking over the story. It's a hard thing to explain to some young writers to say, well, you're creating them, so they can't have free will. They aren't taking over, but they do in the strangest way. And when they do, and they start taking you because of their character, because you've created a character who wouldn't do certain things, in an outline, you might say character would do it. But once you've written that character through a few chapters, you realize, no, he wouldn't do that, or she wouldn't do that. They would take another route. That starts shaping the story. And that's sort of what I mean. When the characters are well-rounded, they take over. And I've done it. And that was the first book I ever had that was a hardcover bestseller. And I've done it the same way ever since. And it just gets more and more exciting because as soon as I hit a couple characters that I start hearing them, especially Jeffy and Amity have conversation within the first chapter or elsewhere. And the moment I heard them talking to each other, I knew who these people were. And then everything starts to flow out of that.
Wow. Okay, this is so cool. So you were originally a plotter, vigorously plotting it out, planning it out down to the details. Then you started to follow the more organic nature of your characters, and that's when you hit your first New York Times #1 best-selling hardcover, something that Dean has gone on to do 14 times with hardcovers, 16 times with paperback. This man is amazing. He is a legend. Oh, we're so lucky to have you. And it's fascinating that switch resonate, like people almost could, it seems like that people could feel that authenticity, that realness, that you were not adhering to this thing that you had pre-plotted. We're getting a lot of love from Facebook, but that you were following who these people actually were and allowing them to tell their stories. That makes sense.
Well, but let's go back to that legend thing. Let's always remember, if I'm a legend, so is Jack the Ripper. So that doesn't really mean a lot, but I'm thankful you said that. But I don't know now what your question was. I assume.
What I just was saying that it's so interesting that you first were plotting, then you switched this more following the organic nature of these characters. And when you switched, you saw that this took off in a whole new way for you. That's fascinating to see that difference in how you work resonate with the audience.
And I think now I don't want young writers who want to outline to think, oh, I shouldn't do that, because we all have our own way. And after all, I started outlining for years before I made that plunge. But I will say it was one of the biggest positives I ever did was to simply say no more outline. And partly because the publisher didn't have prior expectations, and also neither did I. And when I didn't have expectations of where the story had to go, I was able to let it go in places that me at the beginning of the novel would not have thought of. Me at 10%, 20%, 30% is thinking in a different way. And that gets much more exciting. It's letting your imagination go and not reining it in. Now, saying that, I will say, it is true of the publishing business that many, many people you meet will try to get you to rein in your imagination. If you're writing something a little different than anything they've seen before, I like that, because they want you to write. And then if that succeeds, there is a pressure to write the same thing over and over and over again. Those are two forms of death as a writer. So you have to find that right way. You have to hope you end up with a publisher and an editor and so forth who understands where you're going and what you're trying to achieve, and it gives you the freedom to do that. And I've sometimes not had it, and sometimes had it. And right now I have it, so it's very liberating.
Wow. Now, when you're following this organic, evolution of your characters, you're letting them lead you. How do you balance that with needing to, stay in, on point in terms of pacing, in terms of, action, in terms of keeping everything going, in terms of the narrative arc? How do you balance that? Or do your characters ever lead you down a dead end and you're like, oops, I gotta back up and delete a few chapters? Does that happen? Or are you so far down your path that you're just a well-oiled machine and that doesn't happen to you?
I never go back and tear up chapters if I'm in the middle of a book. By that time, I know how all this is going to work. Not necessarily where all it goes, but I've got the full feeling of it. But sometimes early on, you can write a chapter to say, oh, this character isn't working. I've got to find another character, or I've got to reconceive this character, or maybe I just don't do this idea. That sometimes happens, but it happens early. And I know if I'm not right in sync with those characters early, something is wrong. So it's an intuitive thing, and it's very hard to explain, but uh, it's the way I work.
Oh, I love that. That's so amazing. That's absolutely amazing. Well, I want to get to a couple comments we have from our audience. Linda Mallory watching with us today, saying that her husband, he actually passed away 4 months ago, was a huge fan of yours, read every single one of your books, and talked about them endlessly. She says she's only read 2 so far, but that she's watching today in his honor, and that you meant so much to him, and she's thrilled to be able to hear you in person today, and feels that she is in some way watching with him. Linda, that's really special. Thank you for sharing that with us. Thank you for being here. And Dean, how cool is that? One of your biggest fans?
Well, I'm so sorry to hear about her loss, but it's very sweet. And one of the great things about this, remember, I grew up, I've talked about this before, I'll keep it short. I grew up in a very unpleasant household. My dad was a violent alcoholic. There was always a sense that you didn't have a roof over your head tomorrow. Books were my salvation. The writers showed me people lived another way, showed me a way to escape the confines of that environment. It was very, very precious to me. Otherwise, I don't know how I would have turned out if I hadn't been a reader. I don't think I'd have had a good life, because I think I'd have fallen into the pattern of my father. But books showed me that other way. So when I get mail or a comment like that about how much the books meant to somebody, it's the most powerful thing. It's one of the reasons you keep doing this after financially you don't need to. It's because you remember what those books meant to you as a kid. And you know that there are people out there, because they write you all the time, saying what these books have meant to them, or have taken them out of a similar childhood and given them a way to look at life. Or, and this relates very much, a gentleman in my professional life many years ago, an accountant, died in untimely death. And we were very friendly, and I liked the guy very much. I knew he read my books, but I didn't know that they meant very much to him until he passed in an untimely death. And his wife told me his wish was that he would be buried with several copies of my books, his favorite titles. And I had no way to respond to that. And that is how much they meant to him. So I understand this, and it's the thing that keeps you going on the days when the writing doesn't want to come easy, or when you think, why am I doing all this instead of out there running with the dog and having more fun. So it is that, and I thank her for sharing that with me.
Oh, okay. Now I'm gonna cry. This is so amazing. And Linda, thank you for sharing that with us. Thank you for being here today. And we're so glad that this community can provide that comfort for you. We are a community here at A Mighty Blaze, and we're so happy that you can hear from Dean. How special is that? And Dean, thank you for that very lovely, heartfelt response, and for saying all that. It just means the world. Thank you so much. I want to get to some more comments and questions here. Lynn Constantine, another one of our Mighty Blaze authors, part of the sister thriller writer team, Liv Constantine, was with us earlier this year. She says, "You are my favorite author." Lynn, thank you. Also want to hear, we have a comment from Kimberly Waugh, and she is saying that she's a nurse. She couldn't join us live today, but she submitted her, because she's working on the front lines, one of our frontline heroes here at MGH today. But she submitted her question in advance. She said, "I have waited 9 months for The Eyes of Darkness to be available, referencing a pandemic in 2020. And she said, I'm working today, but I would love to know what you say about this prediction. Cheers, and thank you for your amazing work." So yeah, Dean, are you psychic, or what's going on over there?
Well, when this whole thing came up on the internet, it's one of those internet crazinesses. I wrote a book 40 years ago that didn't predict a pandemic. Somebody took a book, page from another book, page from mine, married them together. It became this thing on the internet. 40 years ago, I wrote a story. It's not about a pandemic, but it is about an engineered virus that escapes, or maybe doesn't escape, a weapons lab in Wuhan, China. Now, there has been a weapons lab in Wuhan, China since the 50s. So that was simple research. When I needed to put it someplace, I put it in Wuhan, China. The story is set in the US, but it's about a mother whose child is supposedly killed in a terrible accident, along with a number of other children, but the bodies have to be sealed casket burial because the remains were so mangled. So she never saw her son's body, and one day she starts getting messages that he isn't dead. Then that leads eventually, almost at the end of the novel, to this revelation of this virus and what's been going on. So when this became an internet thing, I would not feed it. I don't want to be Nostradamus. I said, no, I didn't do this. And no matter what I said, it didn't matter. So then I decided, just be quiet, let it die away. Well, it didn't die away. It kept getting more and more virulent as it went. And then I said, okay, I'll do an interview with this journalist, and I'll debunk this one-on-one. And I thought in the course of talking to him, I thought I pretty much debunked it. And then I came up with this line: when you're talking in an interview, you're always happy if something intelligent occurs to you. And I said, look, if I was psychic and could predict a pandemic 40 years later, why can't I tell you right now what I'm going to have for dinner? What kind of psychic am I? And I thought that would put an end to it. It didn't. So it's finally begun to wane away. But yeah, now the odd thing is I did write a novel about a pandemic that destroys the world. And the novel is called Innocence. And nobody ever references it. They all go back to this other novel. So it's strange. It's what makes life interesting, but I wish it would also just fade away. Not life, all this other thing.
All right, mighty mystery friends and fam, you heard it here. Dean Koontz has officially debunked that. It ends here, and you heard it here. So straight from the horse's mouth. Dean, thank you for that. You have also famously said that writing is like making love in a dentist's chair, getting a tooth extracted. Tell us about that.
I said it's like making love in hair, but it's also like having a tooth extracted. That's because you can reach these moments of such exhilaration, and especially on those rare occasions when you fall into what psychologists call the flow state, where instead of struggling to get the page right, to get the language used properly, it kind of goes on its own. And you look at the page and think, why am I not rewriting this 20 times? And you get to the next page and it flows and you move page by page. And instead of getting 5 pages that day that you struggled for 10 hours to get, you've suddenly got 15 pages and it was no struggle at all. And you go back tomorrow and you look at it thinking, well, this is going to be garbage. And it's not. In fact, I had one experience where I went back several days in a row like this, and I couldn't find a typo. I said, why is the brain capable of this at certain moments? And however, you can't make it happen. It's not an act of will. It's what ethics call being in the zone. There's days you play at an extremely high level and days you don't, and you can't make it happen. It's frustrating. In fact, when it is happening, you dare not think about it because that will stop it.
Right.
And it doesn't happen often. Mostly it's hard work. So, but even when it's hard work and you're going along, we have a great boon that most people don't have in their lives. And that is our work, while it's hard to get it done right, is also a kind of play. And at the end of the day, you can be exhausted, but kind of feel like you would be exhausted after you'd spent a day at some sport you liked. So that's a great lesson. And I never forget it in the days when I spend 10 hours and I've got half a page and I think I want to beat myself up, I tell myself, okay, this isn't every day, and you should be grateful that you got half a page.
Wow. So on those days, first of all, thank you for letting us know that that still happens to you, because in my mind, that would never happen to Dean Koontz. So thank you for letting me know that it does. So on those days when you're sitting there and you're struggling, do you ever think to yourself, maybe I should just go and take Elsa for a walk and play fetch for a while? Or you're like, no, my butt's staying in this chair until I get my words done or my pages done. What's that look like?
I'm a butt in the chair guy. Yeah, once I sit down for the day, I'm there. And if it's a weekend during the week, assistant walks Elsa during the day. I work on in the morning and evening. So I don't want anybody to think she doesn't get a walk. She gets a walk, she gets her cookies. Everything is fine. And Elsa's like, but staying in the chair is important. And I had an editor once who was an early editor of mine. And he was an okay editor, but not a great one. But we had a friendship. He was an interesting guy. And one day he said, I'm quitting this. I've written a few novels. I think I can do this. I think I'm going to become a writer. Now, I knew his novels he wouldn't have accepted as an editor, but somebody else did. So I thought, don't quit your day job quite yet. So he quit his job. He started writing, and years passed, and occasionally he would finish something, but he was descending into poverty in the process. And one day I was talking to him and I said, Bob, how to be more productive in this? You've got to, what is your work day like? Yeah. He said, well, I get up and I get to work at 8 o'clock, so I'm an early worker. And if I don't get anything out in 2 hours, then I quit and read the rest of the day. And I said, well, you love to read, so you're rewarding yourself for not writing. So of course you're never going to write anything because you want to go read novels. He said, well, I read 300 books last year. I said, yeah, but what did you write? Well, nothing. And that is one of the risks if we're book lovers. I spend some days where I spend 4 hours and get about 2 sentences, and then suddenly the dam breaks. And the second half of the day is very productive. You just never know. There are moments in stories, as you know, as any writer knows, where you hit a knot, sort of, and it's like, I can't get past this. What could happen here? How do I deal with this? And you have to concentrate on it, or at least sit with it for a while, and eventually you come to the resolution. But if you just say, okay, this isn't working today, I'll go read, or I'll go to the casino, or whatever you're going to do, then you're never going to finish that book.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Dean Koontz, you are blowing my mind, because you're totally right. And you know what? I do the same thing as that editor guy. I think to myself, okay, I got my work done. I got my page done. I edited the scene. I'm going to reward myself by walking my dog or having a big bowl of popcorn. Those are my favorites. Working in my garden. But you're right. I'm training my brain that the reward is to do something else. I've got to keep my butt in the chair. So how do you reward yourself then? When you get that, when you've wrestled your way through, you spent the 4 hours, you only got to do sentences, but then you have the breakthrough, you get into the flow, you're in your flow state, and then you write your 10 pages or your 1,000 words, or you get to the end of the chapter or whatever the finish line is for you, the goalpost. How do you reward yourself?
Well, I stay in that writing mode as much as I can. Business interferes, especially with emails, which is sort of, I think, concocted to destroy writers' ability to concentrate, and had no other reason to exist. So I stay in that chair at my desk from the moment I sit down in the morning, which is usually about 7:30, sometimes 7, and I stay there till dinner. I don't eat lunch simply because if I eat lunch, my brain fogs, and the rest of the day I need 2 hours to digest, and so I just stay away from midday eating. When I get to dinner, then that's the reward. My wife and I eat out almost all the time. she's a good cook, doesn't like to cook. So she works the same hours I do. So fine, we go out, we have a very nice dinner. We only eat where we can take the dog. So we have the dog with us. And I get my Camus Cabernet. I like my Cabernets at night. And maybe we'll watch a movie, maybe not. Or maybe we have dinner with friends. But conversation is a big deal with me. And my wife and I have been married now 53 years, and we never run out of things to talk about. And so dinner is lively conversation, and that's kind of my reward for the day. And then time with the dog, what we do through the evening, and maybe a movie, whatever, and then they can get up and move again. But again, if I didn't love doing it, that maybe wouldn't be enough reward. But there's been other reward, to be crass, there have been a lot of financial rewards and other rewards from just sitting in that chair and doing it. So those are the things that happen because of being in the chair. And those are lovely rewards also.
Wow. Okay. Thank you for this illuminating glimpse into your day. Gail also saying, wow. Mark Cecil, one of our other author team volunteers, saying, wow, this is amazing. In capitals, Mark, we totally agree. Gail, we totally agree. So I just want to make sure I understood you correctly. You don't eat from the time you get to your desk at 7:30, you work until 5, and you don't eat that whole time. Aren't you hungry?
I have breakfast. So I have my breakfast. I have, for a number of years now, I've been on a pretty low carb diet. So I eat a protein-rich breakfast, and then I just go to the limit. There's maybe a moment during some days that I want to get something to fortify myself at noon, but it's not a meal. It's just something like a little protein shake or a couple of crackers or whatever. Maybe just a summer stock. But no, that's just a joke on this. And then it works for me. We all have different metabolisms, I think. But in my case, as I said, a midday meal, I just get foggy a little bit for an hour or 2 minutes. I can't afford to be foggy. I need to keep that story moving.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? So I'm a hearty eater. I'm an Italian girl. I'm a hearty eater. I'm eating every 2 hours, and that's not counting the snacks in between. I'm a voracious eater. But you're right. I do feel foggy after lunch. So maybe I'll try to just limit myself to almonds or something. Or protein shakes so that I can stay focused. Better to be hungry and prolific than well fed and foggy, I suppose.
It's hard to imagine you foggy. I think you'd be on the ceiling in a foggy state anyways.
I'm excited to host you, Dean. I love writing. I live for mysteries. I live for thrillers. You are a literary hero of mine, and I could not be more excited to host you today. And I love being part of this initiative. I love, I do a lot of volunteer work. I'm a member of my board for my local library, which serves a lot of underserved kids, and I live in a really diverse neighborhood. So I love to support my library. I love to support the Blaze, do some other work as well. And I love doing good work, and I'm so lucky to be able to interview you as part of that. It's absolutely amazing. And I think, Dean, many people may not know, you are actually hilariously funny playboy, saying if Stephen King is the Rolling Stones of novels, Koontz is the Beatles. I love that because I love the Stones and I love the Beatles. And many actually reviews comment about your incredible sense of humor. Anybody who follows Dean on Twitter knows how funny Dean Koontz is. And if you're not following Dean on Twitter, you're missing out. Get over there and follow him right away. My partner in crime, Margaret Pinard, another author on our volunteer team, is handling things over on Facebook for me. She's going to post the link to follow Dean on Twitter. Because Dean is really hilarious, and everyone needs to follow him. Dean, another thing that you have said is that you like to deal with every aspect of our condition, and that means terror and humor in equal mix. Some books have more humor than others. What do you think is the secret to writing or to being funny on the page? How are you so funny?
Well, I've always been an optimist from the time I was a kid, and one way you deal with the dark environment you're living in is to find the humor in it. And I've always been able to find humor in everything. But when I started putting it into suspense novels, there was resistance. I remember the first couple of times it happened, and I couldn't restrain it. Then I got this feedback: "You can't do this," and it came from a publisher. It was, I think, the first time I got a really big blowback about it was in a novel called Lightning, and the publisher said, "You can't do this. If you've got humor in this story, and the reader laughs out loud, then they won't be in suspense. They won't be on the edge of their seat." And I said, "Well, no, for me, if character is somebody who makes them, amuses the reader, and they can laugh with the character, or it's something the character thinks or says, then they're more connected to the character, because that's how all of us deal with life, or all of the sane ones among us. We have to deal with it with humor. Otherwise, life would make you crazy. And so if the character does have a sense of humor, and I probably reached the peak of this in Life Expectancy and the Odd Thomas novels, which have a lot of humor in it, then somehow that makes you care more about them, makes them more real to you. And when they're in jeopardy, I think it heightens the sense of jeopardy. And I had a lot of discussion, let's call it discussion, about this for a number of years with some publishers back in the day. And gradually they just accepted it because the sales didn't diminish. And in fact, in some cases, the sales increased. But there's a lot of common wisdom in publishing, as there is in anything, that is very common, but not necessarily wisdom. And the idea that you couldn't mix these, I never quite understood, because you can do it in mainstream fiction. And we've even had people who did it in suspense. Donald Westlake was an absolute prince at this. He was amazing at it. And so it's my way of seeing the world. So in a novel like Elsewhere, you're going to have amusing moments with Jeffy and Amity and the things they think and things they say. But hopefully it keeps you right on the edge of your seat anyway. And that's the only way, actually. And now I've written some novels like Intensity with a lot of witty humor in them. And those are kind of fun in their own way. But I don't think I could have made a career out of it. I would have sort of been burnt out with every girl. It's writing only about dark situations.
Well, I love that. I love and I'm so glad that you pushed back against your editor who said you can't be funny and keep people on the edge of your seat, because clearly you do, and you do it so well. Another question from the audience, David saying, of your own novels, Dean, which two are your favorites? Can you tell us? Can you pick a favorite child, two favorite children?
Two? No, I can't do two. There's all kinds I could tell you I wish I had written, most of the early ones. I can go through probably 7 or 8 that I particularly love. From the Corner of His Eye, Life Expectancy, One Door Away from Heaven, Intensity, that's right up there, Watchers, Devoted, which was another dog story. I'm really fond of Elsewhere, which is a simpler kind of, well, it's not that simple, but it's not an 800 page thing, yet it has some of that same quality. Just different novels you like for different reasons. So to say that I have 1 or 2 or 5 favorite, very difficult to do, but those are some of the ones I like. And the Christopher Snow novels, Fear Nothing Season, I'm particularly fond of some of those.
Wow. Okay. Thank you for sharing that with us. What are some novels, I'm hearkening back to that story that you shared with us earlier in the interview, that about the person that you shared that was so touching about how they wanted to be buried with some of your books. What an incredible compliment. What books would you want to be buried with?
How to Revive Yourself from Death. If that was a title, I'd want to be buried with it. So Probably it doesn't. Well, it probably does exist. Anything you can pick up is already in print. Uh, but uh, I think I'd like to be buried. I never thought of being buried with books, but
Me neither until today. But Dean, I can't stop thinking about it.
well, the next time we interview, I'll come up with a list. Books Dean would like to be buried with.
Exactly. Okay. Well, then that means we have to have you back, and I already can't wait. Dean, another thing that you said really stuck with me, which is you said intuition is seeing with the soul. Tell us about that. What do you mean by that?
Well, there are different kinds of knowledge. Basically, there is uh, learned knowledge, which you get from being taught, and that doesn't mean just teachers in school. It means from your parents, growing up, lessons that life teaches you. And then there's instinct, which is almost an animal sort of feeling. But in human beings, and we don't know if it exists otherwise, there is intuition. There is that. Well, I would actually say there is intuition in dogs. I've seen it in action, and it's something more than instinct. But in human beings, there is intuition. There are those. We used to hear the classic term women's intuition, but in fact, it exists in men and women. And we all experience it, except we don't think about it. There are people you meet, and you think your first instinct is stay away from this person. That's intuition. And sometimes in life you don't, and you find out you were correct. Sometimes you do stay away, and you later learn it was a really good thing you did. There's just the opposite. There's people you meet. And intuition tells you, I've had this experience a number of times in my life. I meet somebody, and in 2 or 3 minutes, I think, I really want to know this person. It's something, it's seeing, it's knowledge that, well, it goes further than that. Let me think if I can think of the right way to say this. Our lives are full with intuitive knowledge. You don't have to be taught that half of something is more than a quarter of it. If those things were put in front of you as a baby, you'll go for the half. You know the difference. There's a lot of knowledge that is intuitive, but where it really gets important is when it starts saving your errors in life. And some people would say that is, they would put a more spiritual spin on it and say it's the natural law. And the natural law is something we know in our bones. We know the difference between wrong and right. And most of us, unless you're sociopathic, and I'm not talking about you. But when I say you, but it's so that's what I mean. Intuition is sort of seen with the soul. It's the gift we're given. And I wrote a memoir of our first golden retriever, and in it, she actually has a moment of intuition about somebody. And it's somebody who was in my life in a business sense that I knew through long issues on the phone. I won't go into that because I don't want to identify how. But I knew this person, they were involved in publicity and so forth. And this person then came to California for a couple of days. I wanted to have lunch. And I said, yes, and come to the house and we'll meet, we'll go to lunch from there. And it was a perfectly nice person as far as I ever knew. And this person, I'm not even going to give away gender, this person wanted to meet Trixie, and our first dog. And I brought Trixie into the room, and Trixie would not come in the room. And this was a dog that loved everybody, as golden retrievers tend to do. Stood outside the room, could not be coaxed into the room. I finally had, and it got embarrassing. I had to go out and bring her in by the collar. And then she huddled up against me and would not cross the room to this other person. And it was so strange. And finally, it got so embarrassing that I said, okay, Trixie has to leave. Trixie's got to go on her walk. Linda will take her on a walk. We went to lunch. We're sitting at lunch, And this person said, I hear you bought a beach house. And I said, yeah, because I'm working 7 days a week. I need some little place to make me go and relax because I'm not relaxing. And this person said, oh, good. The next time I come to California, I'll stay there and I'll have parties every day and you'll be invited to them. And it was no joke. It was a sincere issue. And from that moment on, lunch got very, very strange. And I realized my dog had an intuitive sense about this person that I missed. And it became a very strange lunch that I thought, this will be interesting if I get out of lunch unscathed. And I did, because here I am. But so I think dogs have an intuitive sense of things. And I know human beings do, because the older I get, the better I am about listening.
Wow. And Dean, that's so true, because I definitely noticed that Pelu, my dog, she has a very strong sense about people. And, we'll just be walking down the street and some people she'll run right over to, and some people she'll cower or growl, or her, her ruff of her neck rises, and dogs know. And I guess they don't. And I think you're right. I think we know too, but then our logic overcomes it and we think, oh, we should work with this person, or we should know this person, or this person hasn't done anything to deserve that. But if we were able to strip that logical rationalization away and be in the dog state, we would know too. Wow. Oh my gosh. Well, Dean Koontz, you are absolutely amazing in every single way. I cannot thank you enough for being here with us on A Mighty Blaze, talking to our Mighty Mystery community, our friends, our fam. It has been such a heart-opening, mind-opening, illuminating hour. Thank you so much. Congratulations on Elsewhere, already a #1 bestseller on the day it came out on Amazon. Absolutely amazing. Congratulations on all the incredible praise that you have earned. And we are in awe of all that you do. Thank you so much. And we would absolutely love to have you back anytime here.
Gee, I wouldn't have thought that from the way you've been talking about me. But I would come back. Thank you. You're very ebullient, and that's refreshing. So.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much. Thank you to everyone who's joined us on Facebook, and we will see you next time right here on Mighty Mysteries. Have a great day.